Hello, my name is Jonah Spector, and I completed my needs assessment in regards to economic justice for the trans community in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'll be discussing an introduction, data collection procedures, key findings and results, recommendations, dissemination of information, and my reflection. Introduction to the needs assessment. So the issue is economic injustice, target population, transgender people ages 18 to 30 residing in Phoenix, Arizona. So, according to the National Transgender Discrimination Survey completed by the National Center for Transgender Equality, in Arizona in 2016, 77% of the people interviewed reported that they experienced some type of harassment and discrimination in the workplace. 42% were not hired, 73% reported harassment at school, 24% had become homeless, and 20% were denied housing, all due to gender expression. So 28% of trans people living in Arizona live in poverty versus Arizona's overall state average of 16.4%. So that's rather high. The purpose of this needs assessment is to understand the barriers and needs of the community in order to achieve economic justice. There's a lot of barriers for the community, and so kind of honing in on just a few. And also understanding what resources are being utilized or underutilized. Data collection procedures. So my procedures went as follows. I researched different agencies within Phoenix who serve the target population. I vetted them and I reviewed the website. I found the contact information linked, and I contacted them via telephone or email. Most of them I did both in order to get in contact with somebody. Once I was able to finally contact somebody with the agency, I scheduled interviews either in person or telephonically, and I kept open communication throughout the whole process to discuss the needs assessment. I was able to interview Sarah Kent from 1 in 10. She's the program specialist for homeless outreach. Ashton Skinner from One Community, transgender millennial outreach. Isaac Akabnitis from Safe Out, community development coordinator, and Oliver Swan from the Transport Movement, who's a co-founder in community outreach for the service-based program. So when I met with each agency, I asked them 12 to 15 questions, but these three were the three key questions that I found through the data. What constitutes an LGBTQ-friendly business? Anti-discrimination policies and representation was the overwhelming answer to that question. What resources are being utilized for the transgender community and or underutilized? Shockingly, the answer I received most was word of mouth. So the community talks with each other, shares different resources with one another, and also LGBTQIA plus focused agencies in the community, such as 1 in 10, PFLAG, Native PFLAG, AZ Typo, and Trans Spectrum, among many others. And three, what's the most significant barrier for the transgender community in regards to economic justice? There are a lot of answers, but the two that I received most in this data set was employment and documentation, which I will discuss. So employment, the big need for that would be inclusive policies within businesses or organizations, anti-discrimination policies in regards to gender identity and gender expression, and transgender representation. Documentation, which is a huge barrier for the transgender community and the target population. Documentation, the need would be affordability and gender affirming legal documents, which would be changing your name, changing your gender marker, changing your birth certificate in order for all of your legal documents to match who you are as a person. Two positives that I received from the data set was interconnectedness of the community. That's a big positive. They're very close. Everybody's sharing resources with one another, which I discussed prior. And society is becoming more progressive. This was an answer that I received, which was very positive and good to hear. Recommendations for the community in regards to employment and documentation would be this. Job skills training and resume aid for people who haven't had access to education or job experience. Building a foundation for the community is a huge recommendation in order to help them find jobs, even because hiring discrimination is a big problem. And advertising lists of employers that are transgender friendly and have comprehensive anti-discrimination policies in place already, as well as helping people in the community to understand what that means and what rights you have as an employee. For documentation, creating sponsorships for name changes, it's a very tedious and very expensive process. It's around $330 just to change your name, and you have to go through a whole bunch of different things. And so having a sponsor during that time would be very beneficial. And pro bono legal aid or trained volunteers to help navigate bureaucracy around identification and rules in regards to changing your documentation. Dissemination of information. As discussed prior, I had open communication with the agencies that I interviewed during and after the interview process. So I kept open communication with them, so I was able to create timelines and kind of get an idea of how they would like me to share the information with them. I plan to share qualitative data, the codes, results, and recommendations, so we can start a conversation about what we can start doing. A lot of them preferred email as a form of communication to receive the data. Also, I offered follow-up meetings and to call them on the phone. Reflection, key factors for success. I was able to find success with this needs assessment because I did a lot of research prior to contacting the organization so that I understood what type of services they provided the target population. Plan Bs, which was communicating or trying to communicate with a lot of different agencies who service the target population. I was only able to interview 4, but I was definitely communicating with many more. And keeping open communication was very beneficial to me. Barriers were issues with scheduling, timeliness, and incorrect contact information and websites not updated. This was a huge issue, and unfortunately I had to scrap a few interviews because I wasn't able to figure out how to do them in time. Lessons learned. Something I learned that I will use moving forward is to keep to the assessment schedule that we created at the beginning and have a little bit more assertiveness with my time. I was kind of just waiting for people to respond back to me, and I wasn't being assertive in regards to the deadline, and so I had to unfortunately scrap a few interviews. And creating a little bit more comprehensive interview questions so I can understand the need just a little bit more. But overall, it was a very good process and one that I enjoyed very much.